How do we engage in litigation? And I've been around this movement for so long that there have been a lot of groups that have cropped up to try to teach people their particular legal argument. But in reference to the income tax, I think it's real important for people to have it pointed out. Here are the basics. We got to deal with the constitutional provisions regarding taxation. Here are the statutes. And how are these statutes allegedly based upon the Constitution? And then from the statutes, the regulations that are related thereto, and from there move into, you know, there are some real important issues. And those issues, I've just seen a lot of these, other organizations crop up, like Pete Henderson. Pete Henderson did some studying, and he reached a conclusion, and he started promoting stuff. And a lot of people were intrigued by it and got some results from it after a while, but then soon the IRS comes along and reverses all that. So I would like to expose to, a group of tax patriots, point them in the right direction to where we have some good issues. And then I would like to discuss tonight, if it's possible, to squeeze it in. My view is that there's things we got to do legally. There's going to be a need for us to do something other than pursue administrative remedies, which is a lot of what people like Pete Henderson does. I'm going to map out for you this way to trick the IRS to give you some money, and then a lot of people get into trouble, and he got into trouble. So, one of the things I would like to know, the man who beat the IRS, that is coming from Joe. Who are you referring to with this note on the screen, Joe?
These are just the titles that the Dinesh D'Souza and Laura Logan use for
Oh,
the
okay.
shows. So I promised the listeners that while you were talking, I would share those in the chat.
Good enough. Now we know it's you, the man who beat the IRS. Very good. So can we maybe open up the audience to see what they think needs to be done? My personal opinion is, I would like to increase the knowledge of American people, particularly patriotic Americans, at least into, giving the, average participant in this little school, if we want to call it that, let them realize how important it is. And then once we do that, maybe we can move into some specific things, and I've got some very specific ideas that'll get us further down the road. And my ultimate objective is I would like to, as quickly as we possibly can, engage in some litigation to get some victories.
Well, Helen raised her hand first, and then Claire. So hopefully Helen can unmute and respond to your pitch there.
Yes,
Go ahead, Helen.
yes. I have a question. I need some clarification. I want to understand more of Mark's telling us about how these other tax patriots and their ideas are on the defense, if you will. I'm not quite understanding that concept. Can you clarify that for me?
Sure, but I think Larry would do a much better job. Do you want me to take this, Larry, or do you want
Yeah,
to
go ahead,
address it?
Mark. She was asking you.
Okay, right. So basically, all these people are offering reply letters to what tax agencies are provoking or soliciting the people based on their filings. So if you get a CP 59 letter, okay, who are you going to call? Larry? No, you're going to go to IRS Zoom, David William, et cetera, Pete Hendrickson. They have format replies, or David William, not with David William, Dave Champion has a due process package, I understand, that he uses as a template and adapts for your particular case. They all claim 100% success somehow. So these are three different methods. in contrast to what Dave Champion or Thomas Freed would correspond with the agencies, is David William. He also claims 100% success by filing 1040 NRs, whereas Thomas Freed or Dave Champion would be caught dead filing a 1040 NR. So there you have it. So these are all attempts at resolving the issues administratively without making too much trouble, without having to ever end in court, God forbid, right? And this is a fear game. Everybody, and I fully understand, I can relate to it too, just like everybody else. So instead of playing this game and paying $500, $800, 10,000, $1,000 to 2,000 bucks through an attempt to resolve this administratively that we don't really ever get a black and white answer, why not switch from defense to offense, which means we would sponsor some strategic lawsuits that were well planned that will give us some court decisions that now every American can take to their employer, every business owner can take to their associates in business and say, hey, you know what? Look at this case, look at that case. And basically what we would be doing is something very similar to what actually Dave Champion is doing. He's saying, well, look at this, look at that. What David William is doing, look at this, look at that. But they're doing it from a position of defense in reply or in response to some letters solicited by the taxing agencies. Instead, we would start at the other end. We would create a case that the agencies would have to respond. So did I answer your question, Helen?
Yes, sir, you did. Now, for you, last night we had our free class with Tower Law, which is on the first Thursday night of every month, so that you don't have to pay to attend, because next week's classes are pay for attend for the rest of the month. Now, if you have an email or something, I can give you the free class for the next month, and all of you and anyone in here can participate for free for that night. And then you can ask all the questions about tax that your heart desires. He'll answer them for you.
Okay. And may I ask you a question now, Helen? You're attracted to this platform, right? And how many of these Zoom calls have you been with Joe and Larry thus far?
Never. This is like my first full month of actually participating in these. However, with Eddie Craig, I've been on for 5 years.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, and this
so
month,
that's how I can tell you. Yeah, this is how I can tell you that Eddie, he's spot on his work.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And I think you guys will enjoy Eddie's perspective.
I told you already, I listened to Eddie years back. He was on someone else's radio show. There was a guy and a gal, boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever, and they were coming in. He was, in his very beginning, he was some kind of a deputy sheriff at the time. He came with all sorts of ideas, mostly traffic. I went to Texas. I interviewed one of other gurus there in that meeting as well. We talked. I know a lot of these things, but what I'm trying to say to you, the point I'm trying to make is a lot of participants in Joe's Zoom call have been on this for years, and there was not a penny charged to get access to the meetings, any of these. I'm not being critical. I'm just being factual. So to me, that means something in who I choose to participate. Now, I will take a free class if you don't mind placing that in the chat.
Okay.
Or a
here's
free
what
recording.
I can do. If you guys will share an email in the chat for me to send it to, so that you all three can have access to it for next month in May.
I'll do more than that. I'll give you free access to the, I'll share it in the chat. You'll have access to No Mass Tax Chat, where some of your friends are already. Fair enough?
Perfect. That is
Wonderful,
fair.
Helen.
Thank you.
Thank you. And before we give Claire to put her hand down, Claire, I already contacted you on Telegram and I did not get a reply. You asked me to contact you, and I did not still get a reply in the past 2 weeks. Just be aware of that. So, Joe, I think Claire is next in line.
All right, Claire, I believe you can mute yourself. Go right ahead.
Okay, I thank you, Mark. I have not been able to have much luck with Telegram for some reason. I don't know why. I'm a boomer who's technically challenged. But I would like to have more classes. I'm always great for learning more about this stuff, but I do think they should be free because, well, in our case, Jamie, the IRS already took everything we have except each other, so it's out of the question that we would pay for classes. But we started studying this stuff in 1984. I met Larry in person in Arizona at the Senate at a program they put on in 1989, and the IRS started attacking us earnestly in 1992. And we have done it all. I have 32 boxes of info that I have boiled down from our personal experience. I now have 682 pages of evidence proving this fraud every which way but Sunday. And some days were left out because I only had a 4.5-inch notebook. I could have put more, but I couldn't buy a bigger notebook. I thought I was going to send it to Ed Martin. I called them for 7 weeks and they would not respond. I emailed in those same 7 weeks. Their working group is not working. And I've contacted a lot of other people. Everything that these other guru people have taught, we have done and we have lost. So it works for some people, but not for others. They were attacking Jamie and I because we had a John Birch chapter and we were very active in our community with the congressional town halls and writing letters to the papers and all that stuff. So we were politically targeted because they couldn't let us keep telling what we knew. So I think if we have a class, the first thing that it should start with is about jurisdiction and not talk about tax until we understand the history of our individual rights and how they are to be protected, and then the jurisdiction difference between the feds and the states, which Larry has laid out very well on his website. He also has a lot of great things about all the patriot mythology that's out there, and a lot about the statutes at large. It's very hard to find these things. You don't even know what they are, so it's very hard to even look them up. And I do think that we need to have some kind of offensive winning lawsuit so that we have precedents from a court. But, the obstacle, one of them is that, one of the prosecutors was talking to Tommy Cryer out in the hallway. And he said, I know you're right, Tommy, but I've got 3 girls in college. So a lot of people, for their own livelihood, are not going to, look at any of this stuff. I think the judges have been threatened. So their families are a lot more important than the people that are coming in before them. And then, Jeff Dickstein, I'm not real sure how to pronounce his name, but he wrote Judicial Tyranny in 2010 when that was published, and it's gotten much, much worse since then. So that's one reason that we have not filed to go to court and get a judgment or a declaratory judgment or anything like that, because we know more than the judges do, and we've seen 20 judges that have sent people to jail and lost their property over a tax law that they don't know what they're doing, or they've been threatened and they're doing that. So it's a real big obstacle. So if we do have a lawsuit, it's got to be ironclad that even the worst Biden judge would never be able to say no to, which is going to be very difficult. But I like a free class, I like the info, and I like the idea of having a lawsuit.
Thank you, Claire. By the way, I am lucky enough to have, I don't think it'll show up on my screen. No, it won't. Judicial Tyranny and Your Income Tax. I've got it right in my hands.
If you hold you hold it farther away from the screen, let's see if it shows.
It's like
So
a whole-
also on that compact disc that flash drive we're sending out too. A PDF of Jeff's book.
Right, right. Okay, is that it, Claire?
Yes, for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So the next one, I'm following the chat, and we got a lot of people, like 4, 5, 6, I would say that I counted, 7 maybe, that say they would be interested. Suggestions are, I would be interested in doing this. This is when we were talking about the Larry starting a law school kind of a thing. I'm interested to learn more. I would be difficult. It would be difficult for me to pay a monthly fee. Okay, you'll pay a yearly fee. How can we get started after reading your book, Mr. Bannister? Okay, so that's Brendan's from iPhone. You all, looks like you already answered that. And the next question or comment, okay, is clarification request from Larry, from Jen. So Mark read someone's letter proposing a course to be paid for. And it seems like people are writing in this chat that they are willing to pay. Okay, we just pointed that out. For this sort of information / class. And the funding could go towards this offense Mark just spoke about with these strategic lawsuits. I'm confused on Larry's response to this though. Okay, okay. It sounds like he's not interested and is saying this won't work from his experience, or am I misunderstanding this? Larry?
Where did that?
Yeah, well, I think it was a misunderstanding. Maybe you were commenting about something else.
Well, I've always had an interest in trying to educate people because I think it's real important. If you go over to my website, you will see an effort on my part to correct a lot of erroneous legal ideas of a lot of people. You know, I run into a lot of these wild ideas that float around the freedom movement that get a lot of people going down the wrong road. Yes, there we go, the Dictionary Law Journal. And, you know, I'm interested in the money issue. I'm interested in the tax issue. I'm interested in a lot of other issues. And also, like favorite patron issues, you know, there's scams. You know, this movement has for years been subjected to a lot of wild and crazy baseless ideas. And I've had to defend these people that have been followers of and have implemented some of these wild ideas. So I know that it's real important for the bad ideas to cease circulation. So I have worked a lot on trying to destroy a lot of these bad ideas. Kind of like, you know, years ago there was, you know, this idea, well, the UCC is the Uniform Commercial Code is the fundamental law that applies all across the world. And people believed that and got into trouble. So there's a real need for the bad ideas to be identified and exposed. And then there's also a real need for the American people that are wanting to find out a little something about the law to be educated about some real substantive issues.
Wonderful. So before we move to Renata, Larry, I don't mean to cut you off, but
No,
you're
go
gonna
ahead.
tell me that we're running out of time. Okay, so I got to be a little bit more succinct here. Before we get to Renata, could you shoot? I almost forgot my question.
I think it was that he keeps saying there's a need, but he still is not answering if he's willing to do the class or not, or thinks this is a good idea.
Well, we're getting to that, and I think that there will be some caveats beyond that. And just for your information, real quick, since you intervened, we have talked about it this afternoon, and we're trying to figure out which way would be feasible because that requires a lot of time, and we don't have thus far. Everybody donated time. We don't know whether that's something feasible for you guys, first of all. And that's why we're going to have towards the end of this presentation tonight, we're going to have a discussion regarding that. But we're trying to get to respect everybody's concerns here. And I will remember what I was going to say, so I'm going to go straight to Renata. She says, is Paymon's petition to Congress, to an extent, considered offense, albeit, I don't know how to pronounce that, albeit, okay. From his own notes, most representatives brush off the petition letter. Can you answer that?
Me?
Whoever has the answer, Joe?
I'm just still reading it. Paymon's petition to Congress, to an extent, considered offense. I mean, I guess that just depends on the person's opinion, but yeah, I would say that's offensive. I mean, in the sense of being on the offense and not defense, not offensive like it's harmful to someone. Yeah, I think that, certainly petitioning our government, I mean, the founders thought it important enough to put it in the First Amendment. Now, I think you also say, though, as far as a brush off, apparently that's the status quo, right? Is that they do brush off and don't pay any attention to it. But that's been going on for a long time. I don't think that's any reason to not petition. And in fact, if they brush you off, it goes to show just how serious, the waters we are in. So yeah, I would call it offensive, an offense versus defense.
With all due respect, Joe, I love you. I wouldn't call it an offense when you petition. I think a lawsuit is an offense.
Well,
Okay.
I guess it's the cheerleaders on the sidelines, not the football players on the line, right?
There you go. That's how I would look at it. Okay. Okay, great. So you want to read the next one, or you want me to do it? It says, perhaps Claire and others won't pay, but I think certain people would, as evidence in this chat above, as I would also be willing to pay, especially if it was course style, content intensive, and not Zoom style chatting. Okay. Got the hint. It could also be donation style with different tiers, so people could donate according to their desire. So these are the details that we're going to have to actually iron out, Jen. We did consider this, but these are some logistics that need to be worked out to see what time would need to be allocated. So, time is money. And then you said, is there a current donation link that is earmarked for this effort? We're working on that too. And in prior shows, I don't know if you were present or not, we kind of suggested we kind of voted for Joe to be the treasurer, since I believe we all trust him to do a good job and have the moral fiber to keep us all informed and in line.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, so for the time being, right, the conduit is through my website. You can make the donation there, and the $100 is a request for the thumb drive with all of Larry's information, and there's been about a dozen, I think, Mark, so far, that have gone ahead down that road, and the thumb drives are either in their hands or about to be. And so, my comment on the tuition or a cost is that, maybe we can try to solicit people just like you'd have at a university where you have donors, big whale donors who make a contribution so that people's tuition can be paid, right? So that the people who are paying aren't feeling like, well, why am I paying if these people are going for free? But by the same token, people who can't afford it but want to learn and want to be part of it should be. So, we don't want to make this a socialist communist system, but we also don't want to exclude people who want to learn, because isn't that our goal, is to cultivate a population of Americans who want to learn what their government's all about, what the taxation system's all about, so we can keep it honest.
Larry, are you convinced that we have, at least by the presentation of tonight's group, there is enough interest for us to seriously consider and open up discussions for a law course,
Yeah, I
something?
think the first step ought to be for those that are interested, give a notice, and let's do something like, reassemble on some other program or maybe this one at a different time and discuss all this. And while I have the floor, I would like to say this. There was another girl that attended this meeting a couple of programs ago, and she brought up some ideas. And in the interim, she was inquiring about, well, there's got to be something more than the statutes, the income tax statutes. Well, there are. And they go back into time. So I created another flash drive that's got things like, a lot of IRS material, ancient IRS material that goes back to the Civil War on it. And then people can see, how far back some of this material goes that it can have an impact upon, well, that lends to an understanding of how various federal taxes have been implemented, applied, litigated, challenged, battled. So if people would like that new, different flash drive, let me know and we can make it available.
My comments that I got in exchange from the people getting some of the people getting the thumb drive is that they see it, but most of them seem to have a hard time relating, or they're looking like a cat in a calendar. So trying to figure out what am I reading? What am I looking for?
Yeah,
So
well, that's the reason why it's real important to have an education about this.
I agree. I agree.
Pull up those things, those items, and discuss them.
Right.
When I got into this, I had one, and when I was in school, I had one course in tax. Hated it. But then I got over into the freedom movement and found that there was a lot of people that were interested in it. And even though I had absolutely no background in it, what I did is I dove in head first. And to me, that's the way to, really wrap your head around these tax issues. So I'm willing to, for those that are willing, that are go along with me, let's jump in. You got to take a look at all this stuff. The first thing to do is to become familiar with the taxing provisions of the United States Constitution, then start taking a look at the tax acts, and then start taking a look at the regulations. Because those are the three primary areas that are real important for us to come up with, an attack upon the income tax.
Based on our conversation this afternoon, I sent a document to Joe. And Joe, is that document the PDF about the 1985? So the question I'd have for you, Larry, is would you mind addressing? So, for example, I would like people say, what's the benefit? We just got a question. What's the benefit of being a student? And I hope this will answer your question, Gerardo, or Gerardo, I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sorry. This is a document, for example. Let's say you go to one of these groups that promote solutions in taxation, administrative solutions, and you find this document displayed on their site. Okay? And you see page down here, page 478. And Joe, would you mind scrolling to the top? Let's see if there's any more information. 1.1441, all these numbers, 26 CFR. Would any of you know where this is from, where this came from, how to find it, how to even validate whether or not this document is for real? And why would this be important? Well, let's read the highlight. Joe, would you mind reading that?
So this is section 1441-5, claiming to be a person not subject to withholding. Subparagraph A, individuals. For purposes of Chapter 3 of the Code, an individual's written statement that he or she is a citizen or resident of the United States may be relied upon by the payer of the income as proof that such individual is a citizen or resident of the United States. This statement shall be furnished to the withholding agent in duplicate.
Larry, with your attorney skills, you read this. What would you tell a student whether or not this section here has any merit or not?
Well, I don't know. I would think that whoever's promoting this, first, let me identify this. This is a set of regulations. This is one regulation, really. And you can tell that because, this section number, you can see up at the top, it has one dot. That is, the income tax regulations are divided into parts. This is part one, the income tax. And then, part 31 is withholding taxes. That's the way the regulations for Title 26, the federal tax laws, are divided. Now, 1441 is the first section in a group of sections related to withholding on non-resident aliens and foreign corporations. And this -5 lets you know that, this is the fifth specific regulation under section 1441 of the code. Now, you can see also the date, 4/1 of 85. That's April the 1st of 1985. So this is, 40 years old, this page. So, it's not difficult for people to learn how, things are structured. Like it's how are the federal laws structured? What is the United States Code? I think that a lot of people have no idea what the United States Code is. I think they need to be exposed to that. They need to be exposed to, well, how do you look up once you are given a statute related to federal laws, how to look them up, and then have an explanation and understanding of the regulations. And this is just basic information that somebody I can explain it to people, and then once you have it explained, now you have the ability to go look something up. And so it's not difficult. The simple fact of the matter is that nobody's doing this, and so it's difficult for people, the average American, the average concerned American. How do you dive into this stuff? Because all of the stuff like this is Greek when it doesn't need to be.
Well, we have all these people that have the thumb drives, and they also have the last three presentations on the Zoom call with Joe, and we already made references to all these. So there's a startup right there to get a taste of what a class like this would be. Okay, so how about the message of this regulation? Would you mind addressing that? Because I get some questions about it. Whether this was, some people say, well, look at the date. Is April 1st, 85. So
Well,
is there any
what's the
any
argument
meaning?
that they're making, Mark?
First of all, is this April Fool's? Because it looks like the highlighted message in this regulation is rather hopeful for someone that has to file under Chapter 3. What does, for example, what does Chapter 3 of the Code means for purposes of Chapter 3 of the Code? People don't know that. Would you care to address that?
Well, that would be that's the reason why it would be real important for people to have an explanation as to how the tax laws were built over time. Start off with 1913, and it's not difficult. It's all available, and then you can see how the tax laws were built and they were expanded over time. Then you can get into these chapters. The chapter 3. Are we dealing with withholding? Withholding is real important, and ultimately, the reason why I got involved in this project is, I think it's real important for people to do something other than just, well, I'm going to attempt to, I'm going to try to get out of withholding. I think it's real important. I think it's almost essential for us to bring tax justice that there should be some lawsuits regarding withholding.
I agree. And other people comment about this section. They say, well, this section is no longer valid. this was 1985. What do I care about this? Was there any change in the Internal Revenue Code that would render the highlighted statement in this regulation null and void? Let's read the regulation. Well, I mean, we already read the regulation, but what do you make of it? Is it true if an individual back in 1985 were to sign a statement that he or she is a citizen or resident of the United States, then withholding would not be performed by your average business owner there that says, well, I got to withhold from you?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, you're the only one I'm asking at this point.
Well, I am getting ready to do a search right now. 26 CFR.
I tried to already do it for you, Larry. Isn't this it? I mean, if I just
Oh,
Cornell, this is what came up for
oh, okay, yeah.
14.5.
I would see it's still, yes, it's still there.
But you got to go to the individuals. See if you find 4041.5.
Well, Section 1441 is the first in this chapter dealing with withholding on non-resident aliens and foreign corporations. 1441 is the section number in the Internal Revenue Code. Now, when they created regulations to explain what they were doing under Section 1441, there are at least 5 regulations, or at least this is the 5th regulation in that. And it related to this topic matter. And this regulation is still in effect. I doubt it's even been amended since, since this document, 1985, on the screen was published.
But the gist of it, the message of it, the meaning of it, can somebody today provide the same statement that he or she is a citizen or resident of the United States, and this would still have legal
So do these people that are making this argument, can they explain who is subject to withholding?
Well, they can't. Well, all they're saying, well, if you read this, and this is highlighted in this regulation in 1985, it's pretty self-explanatory that you claim to be a person not subject to withholding, because that's what the HR department says. Why are you requesting me a W-4? Oh, we need to withhold taxes for the feds. Oh, really? Why? Because if I give you a statement as a citizen or resident of the United States, then you don't have to withhold. So this is what people are looking
then
for.
people need to go over to, the 3,000 sections that relate to withholding and look at the sections themselves and also take a look at the regulations. And when you start doing that, you begin to see why these people are making the argument that these American citizens are subject to withholding. So that brings up a very real battle. And I think it's real important for people. Number one, I find employers are completely lacking,
Oblivious. Yeah, oblivious.
oblivious. They have no idea as to who's subject to withholding. They turn to the sections relating to withholding in the Internal Revenue Code, turn to the regulations, and their first reaction is, well, my employee right here, he's subject to withholding. So we got a battle. We got a difference of an opinion between the employers who think that the people that work for them are subject to withholding, and then hey, I've even represented some employers who tried to explain this to their employees. Well, gee, maybe you ought to consider not withholding. And the employees got pissed. They wanted to have withholding. So,
Right.
withholding is one of those areas. Go talk to an employer and bring up this issue of withholding and escaping and getting rid of and no longer being subjected to withholding, and see what the employers do. And then you're
Yeah.
going to see, wow, now we've got this sizable segment of the American economy, the American population, that believes that a citizen here in the United States is subjected to withholding. Well, it looks like to me we got a real battle.
Well, one of the first things they would get is you show somebody this paper that we're just looking at, and they'll say, well, this is 1985. So they're going to go ask their HR or their tax attorney or their CPA. They're not going to ask Joe Bannister, I guarantee you that. And they're going to say, well, sorry, we got to do what IRS has got to do. And the IRS is going to go over to Section 3000, right, Larry?
Oh, yeah.
And that's what they're going to argue. So this is the point I'm trying to make to everybody. And we already started a couple shows ago, but I tried to figure out how can we prove this to you guys have a visual. And this is a visual. This ends up being administrative
respond to
bickering.
that? There's two types of withholding.
Of course.
There's withholding under, the Subtitle A, and the withholding on non-resident aliens and foreign corporations. It starts with Section 1441, which deals with withholding, and then 1461 makes those withholding agents for non-resident aliens and foreign corporations liable for the tax. But then you have this other separate provision, which is the big issue here in America. You got these sections starting with 3401. That section deals with wage withholding on employees. And the employers say, well, you're not a non-resident alien, but you're an employee. And therein lies the foundation for the difference of an opinion.
That's where we were talking about this as the bridge between Subtitle C and Subtitle A.
Right.
And how they trespass that and through confusion. And the point I was trying to lock this in with was that arguing these things in any kind of defensive reply to their CP 59s, et cetera, is an administrative bickering that will be just defense. And I hope I see Renata already replied to that. So I'm hoping that answers both Renata and Gerardo's as far as what you can learn from these courses. First of all, you'd be able to distinguish between this section, why is this valuable, and how would this relate to and counteract the 3,000 sections, 3,000s. And what's the Subtitle A, Subtitle C, and what's the bridge between those, and which kind of withholding are we talking about in any kind of consensus. Now I see Claire and Helen have their hands raised, and there are 4 questions. Okay, do you want to open up the floor for Helen and Claire? Claire was first, Helen was next.
Sure, go right ahead, Claire.
Well, talk about putting a square peg into a round hole. Neither Section A or C title applies to the private sector. So we're trying to look at the income cap and put ourselves inside this title, and we are not there. We are not employees. We don't have an employer in the private sector. That's a term of art in Title 26 that doesn't mean the same thing that we say. So that's why we need to start with jurisdiction. The IRS has no jurisdiction over anything that we earn in the private sector, and there's not one syllable in Title 26 that applies to any of us earning money in the private sector. And so we don't need to be scrutinizing all the minutiae of 1441 or any other section of these 10,000 pages, because we are not in there. If you do a search for American Samoa comes up, and that is in compliance with this law. But Americans in the 50 states are not mentioned in this code, and we need to stop thinking this way because it doesn't apply to us. And if you go to the definition, 7701 section of Title 26, entirely Part B is all about aliens and non-resident aliens, and they're the individuals. We are not. You go to 1.1-1, and it's the taxable income of every individual who's the head of a household that earns such and so in a year. And you go, well, I'm a head of a household and I earn this. No, you're not. You're not an individual in this code because in the definitions it says, as in this title, it means this. It doesn't mean that anywhere else. Only in Title 26 is individual means alien and non-resident alien, but it's not us. That's my point about jurisdiction. Thank
We
you.
agree. We certainly agree. But who would you argue this with, Claire?
Well, you
Because
don't. You can't because the guy that you want to work for, they don't want to take time to defend your rights. They're just going to not hire you. That's why we need precedent from a court.
okay, good. That's what I wanted to make you restate that because you said it in the previous take, and I wanted you to restate that because we think the same thing. As the solution is, this is the offense that we need to take. Create the scenario where we take them to court rather than trying to argue between us and the employers or businesses among businesses, W-9s, W-4s, and all this. And I think you just confirmed that we're on the right track. And thank you
Well,
for that.
we've lost, Jamie's lost his career because when people were served with levies, it was so much easier to just let Jamie go. And they just say, hey, when you get it worked out, call us and you can work for us again. The late, great Gary Thomason took his girlfriend to a mom and pop thing that she was working for, and he laid this out for them. And he called the accountant who just happened to be in the other room, and he said, if she says that she's exempt, then we don't withhold. And the accountant said, oh, yes, if she does that, we have to follow what the law says. But that's because they were a little tiny business. They weren't a big corporation that is got attorneys that are telling them the wrong things about this. So it's got to be a lawsuit with a winning precedent that we can show these people that they're flat out wrong. And the other
Think
thing is
we
we
think
have to
there
have a
would
way
be
for people to earn money to do this.
we think there will be several lawsuits necessary to work together, but that's for another conversation. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for your confirmation here. I'm glad you think alike. And looks like Helen, her hand is up.
So
Joe,
to reiterate what she was stating, I was going to say the same thing about the definitions. First of all, we have to understand what the definitions are and upon whom they apply. And also the original bills that created those definitions. That's the most important thing, because in the original bill that created that law or statute, it will tell you in there upon whom it applies. Now, the second part, answering to Larry, when he was stating about how the employers are applying how the law reads. Well, the employers don't read the law, number one. The number one thing that they rely on are their tax preparer or the advocate or whomever their advisor is for taxes. That's what I've run into personally when I've tried to argue these elements of them equivocally, asking me for a W-4 and a W-9. Well, I can't sign that because this does not apply to me. I'm not who's defined in this chapter that you're requiring me to do a W-4 or W-9 to withhold my earnings. But again, they say, well, it's not us, it's our tax advisors. So the employers themselves, their payroll and whomever is doing the withholding, they're following their lawyers and their tax advisors. That's where they're getting this information from. And yes, you're right. It's totally erroneous in regards to upon whom it applies. And yeah, I wish that I could just go ahead and, have a lawsuit against my job, because I know if I refuse to do a W-4 and W-9, and I've already had two employers, one of them I was 1099 with, and I refused to sign another 1099 with them. And they said, well, we can't let you continue doing the work, even though they enjoyed the work that I did and that it was accurate and concise. They said, but we're not going to keep you on because you refused to sign a 1099. That's the
state
kind of
are you?
lawsuit I
Which
need.
state? Which state are you in, Helen?
Texas.
You're in Texas?
Yes.
Helen, contact me.
Absolutely. And hey, Eddie's in Texas too. In fact, this is
I
his
know, but
area.
okay, got it. Okay, let's
Yeah.
talk. Right now, I'm gonna post the link to No Mass Tax Chat, and you have a special invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Larry,
Yes, sir.
there is a question for you, sir.
Fire away.
As what about a class action suit?
Well, there's a lot of people always saying, what about a class action suit? Well, first, you got to, typically class action is going to start off with a handful of people. And they want to define the class, a big class, and go after one defendant or a group of defendants with this large group of people. Now, giving notice is real important. Giving notice is real important about complying with due process. So let's say I live here in Alabama. I want to, have a lawsuit against, a large company that affects a whole lot of people here in Alabama. Tens of thousands of people. Well, you know what it's going to take in order to institute that suit. That plaintiff, you may have a whole bunch of people affected by one or a group of defendants. But the problem is you got to give notice to the class. And giving notice to a class, let's say, years ago when we had newspapers, you would have to run ads in newspapers and the plaintiff would have to pay. So imagine, years ago we had some of these nationwide newspapers. What's it going to cost? I remember when we were doing with just Bob Schultz's organization, we were running some ads in nationwide newspapers, and they were about around 50 grand each. And so, just giving notice to the class by means of a class action lawsuit can be expensive. So one of the things you got to, in order to, consider whether you're going to go the class action route, you got to also have the funds available to give notice to the class, because you can file the class action suit and the judge is going to have to you're going to have to make a motion with the judge. Well, how are you going to give notice to the class? And he's going to have to, approve whatever you have in the way of a suggestion. So a problem about class action lawsuits is the expense that's involved just to get going. Giving notice to the class. So does that?
Yes, excellent. Thank you. Is there a better chance with a class action lawsuit versus, say, one bickering between a state person and the state, or the state and the feds, a
Well,
one-on-one?
I consider test cases to be what really a lot of people in the movement want to pursue. We've got these important issues. And, having funds available to pursue some big cases, sometimes you just have to, keep it simple. And so we don't need class action lawsuits. What we need are carefully planned test cases, which is different. It's still a lawsuit. You have one defendant facing off against one plaintiff, or one defendant facing off against 4 or 5 plaintiffs. Those are the manageable, the least expensive kind to pursue. I call them test cases. So do most of the lawyers.
And would you say those are safer as well because they would not have the same finality as a class action?
Well, I wouldn't want to get started unless you had a real good chance at prevailing. And, there are some real good issues, tax issues, that have a whole lot of strong authority. And, the problem is um, it's real difficult in the tax movement to get past. If you got a good issue, you've got a lot of people that are, uh, I call them gurus. And this movement's been subjected to a lot of gurus. A lot of people got a lot of ideas, and it can get pretty nasty in the tax movement. But there are some real good issues, and they do need to be pursued in court. And I do think that we need to have some cases are on withholding in federal court, or we can have withholding in state court. Hey, there are some, I've run this idea by, and I hate rolling ideas like this out because I never know who's all of these, all are participants in these calls. And by rolling some idea out, you may be giving away some strategy. But here's one idea that I think would be real important. I think we ought to go into a state court where there's no state income tax and raise federal issues. And a lot of people, well, how can you raise federal issue in state court? In reference to withholding, boy, there's a way you can frame it and only raise the state issue. And that's called the well pleaded complaint rule. So you could really bring a federal issue in state court, but you have it characterized as really a state issue, and that's perfectly legitimate.
Renata wants to know what would be the ballpark cost to do one of these lawsuits.
Well, there's a lot of factors involved, but I think there needs to be one or two plaintiffs, maybe suing one or two defendants, and there you keep it simple. And it's one of the things I have found with the freedom movement over the years, there's a lot of quote esoteric issues, and a lot of these invented esoteric issues have created a lot of problem. But there's a way that you could have a reasonably cost lawsuit to bring up the withholding issue in state court. But then again, there's also you could walk into federal court and raise these issues. But the question becomes, you're gonna you got to get some plaintiffs, you got to pick the place, and once you pick the place, hey, ask Mark. We've already spent some time this year, in the search for what state do we want to go into, and who do we want to have as plaintiffs. So, their first needs to be a group of people that are committed. They can raise some funds so that once we know that, we've at least got a group, that's on board, which is usually further than we ever get, we can make some progress. But there is a need for funding. But then if we had the fund, we've got states. Texas is one. We've even had one of our members on this phone call tonight. Said I'm from Texas. We've got Tennessee's another place where you don't have a state income tax. Florida's
Nevada,
place, yeah, Nevada,
Montana.
Florida. Yeah. So I would like to have, because it's close by, I wouldn't mind having a lawsuit regarding withholding raised in state court in Tennessee. And I got a friend of mine that's a lawyer up there. I've already talked to about it.
Mm-hmm.
And
So,
these are the types of issues that need to be pursued.
as far as costs, we, in our conversations to answer Renata's question, we looked upwards of $100,000 for a suite of about 4 to 5 lawsuits that would work together. Is that still the case? Are we behind that, or did you change your opinion?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I'm trying to
Well,
answer.
I was reading this note. Somebody sent up a note, talking about the judges being under the influence of the IRS.
Right.
And
No, we didn't. We didn't answer the question for Renata yet. As far as what we're looking at, 100,000, 200,000. What are we looking at?
No. Hey, if we got say $20,000, $25,000 raised, we could. Whoa, look at Arnold.
We could get things started.
I live in. Yeah, we could get things. We could get some things started if we had funds like that.
Okay, so let's say for comfortable level, we would be looking at 25,000. Does that sound realistic for you, Larry? Because we're all looking
Oh,
up
yeah,
to you.
yeah. Hey, if we had that available, then I would like to pull together a committee of this group, a small enough group, and we have a pledge of secrecy so we can lay it all out.
Okay. I think it's a good starting point. I think this is a very fruitful discussion. And if anybody wants to comment, please raise your hands. Let's get this iron out tonight so we have something to talk for the next week, Larry and I and Joe, and see how we can orchestrate this so it has the best winning logistics.
Can I
Now's the
respond?
time.
Helen just raised an issue. She says her daughter lives in Aniana. Well, that's in Alabama, and Alabama has an income tax. So,
Yeah, I know. But you know what? She's new to the employment sector. Maybe we could have her help you out.
well, we could have, be helpful if we had financial support. But, in reference to pursuing litigation, I think we need to be getting into states where there's no state income tax. I think we need to be considering that. We need to have a suit, perhaps in state court, or we could do it in federal court. But a challenge withholding in a lawsuit against an employer. That's what needs to be done. But then when we do it, it's going to have to be on the quiet until we get rolling. Joe, some notes are being posted.
Some notes in the chat.
Well, I don't have my chat open, but they're coming up. These
Well,
notes.
Arnold placed a question that used to be a question that Ed Rivera and I were talking about 25 years ago. He asks, if we file a lawsuit, do we file in Article 1 or Article 3 court? So that kind of a question.
Oh,
we have-
that's for federal courts.
That's correct.
And
So you're talking. Go ahead.
In reference to withholding, I don't think there's any plan for anybody to pursue a withholding issue in federal court at the present time. I mean, you can. Withholding is a federal law. You can challenge federal laws in federal court with people from the same state. Normally, if you're going to go into federal court, you got to have diversity of citizenship, meaning the plaintiff and the defendants are from two different places. But if you've got a federal question, you can have a federal lawsuit against people from the same state. There's no requirement for diversity. But we're not. I would like to. Personally, my opinion is I think we need to go into state court and raise the issue of withholding. And you're going to have a state court judge who's subjected to federal withholding. Whose side is he on? I would suggest that if you file a state case involving federal withholding in state court, your judge is going to be there's a real good probability he might be on our side.
He'll at least be interested in not putting
Yeah.
his finger on the scale one way or the other.
Yeah, if you raise the withholding issue in federal court, unless there are some very specific federal issues we could raise, I would like to see raised in federal court. But for what we're talking about here, against a suit against an employer over the validity of federal withholding, I would want to at least start off in federal court.
Basically, we're talking about a stepping stone towards that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Eric
But
suggests
hey, look, we could the whole battle could be won in state court.
we know.
Let's say we had several cases in various state courts, and they all came down on our side. At that stage, you might have the ability to really create a real battle over withholding. It become something other than a legal issue, a litigated issue. It could become a social issue, a political issue. The system might say, "Ooh, withholding is falling by the wayside," as it should. It should be applied to the real people who are subject to it.
So Eric is
We're
suggesting.
specifically named. We're specifically named. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't
No.
know. I thought you were done. So Eric is saying this knowledge should be added to Enoch, the LLM developed by Mike Adams. I'm familiar with Mike Adams. I listen to his shows. The reason we're staying away from that, Eric, is because large groups can be infiltrated. That's why I chose to have the Telegram forum private, only invitation only for people that know each other. We're a tight-knit group, and we don't give this information to where we can be easily infiltrated. If it comes a point where we have to exchange private information that could be compromising for some people. So I hope you understand that, why we're trying to keep this in these calls and my private channel. Answering also Gerardo, he says, I'm new here. If you start your academy or school, would you inform and consider me to join? Thank you. And I think everybody would be, once we establish the logistics. I'm sorry, I don't usually like to talk too much. Then yes, we would do that. And Jerry says Texas would be a good place to start the lawsuit. We agree. Larry would like a little bit closer proximity. If we had someone in Tennessee, would be ideal for Larry. But
as long as we had a good group in Texas, we'd need some. Either I have to go in pro vici, or we get some local lawyers. Texas has some real good possibilities, but I would certainly want to do some forum shopping, meaning what state court are you going to file the case in? So I think we ought to devote some time to trying to pick the locale and try to engineer it so we get maybe some favorable state judges.
Jerry, are you in Texas? We know Helen is in Texas, and she's already willing. But we don't know if Jerry is in Texas, why he suggested Texas.
I'll see what Eddie'd like to do. I bet he'd love to join this.
Okay. Now, Kit says Randy would be the great one to ask. I'm assuming Randy is in Texas. Kit? You can unmute yourselves, Oh, Randy Kelton. Yeah, he has his radio station.
Oh, no. We've seen some of his stuff coming out, and his arguments are not as rock solid as Eddie's.
Well, that's why they split, didn't they?
Well, Randy's still on the show and everything, but every time Randy comes to class, he's 3 sheets in the wind, unfortunately. And what Eddie's going through, all of this guy's lawsuit that he made in Texas, I can't exactly remember. It was I think a state lawsuit for something. But unfortunately, there's a lot of arguments that he made that were not relevant to what he should have been making. And Eddie had to go back and redo his lawsuit to try to refile it later on because it got kicked out. And so, no, he would not be appropriate, but Eddie definitely would. I'm going to run that by Eddie.
Okay, so Jerry replied. He says, yes, he's in Texas. So if he got my Telegram link invite, please contact me there. And you already know what I'm going to say to you. Any other daring people out there? You know whose comments I miss? Nelda, I think I didn't hear Nelda tonight. Oh, she's not on the call. I saw a few comments from Jen, but I didn't hear her, and she's very well spoken. So unless someone else wants to say something, I wanted to touch one last subject for tonight, if we still have a couple more minutes. Joe?
Go for it.
Okay, so the second point that Nelda made in the last call, to wrap it up, so now everybody is covered from prior calls and tonight's calls, was the FOIA issue. And she said, has anyone requested the Treasury decisions that impose liability onto the U.S. citizens? I know Paymon has a large reward for anyone who can prove it, but has anyone FOIA'd for it? When they can't respond, this also sets up an opportunity to sue for the information. Is that true, Larry?
Well,
I want
I'd
to,
like, oh, go ahead.
I want to chime in. I responded to that question from Jen and Nelda about it
Oh,
was
yeah.
the attorney Michael White from the Federal Reserve, Federal Register. The Federal Register is the notice that we get if Congress makes a law that applies to us or not. It clarifies who it pertains to. And he said that the IRS had not submitted anything saying that anyone had to file a return. And I sent that document to Joe so that maybe he could post it sometime so that those people could see it. It's part of my 682 pages. But yeah, they have never submitted anything noticing the Americans that they're liable for any of this, because we're not.
Yeah, that's something that Larry's pointed out very, very frequently about the
But
Federal
you know,
Register.
it's a big issue because there's other regulations at issue, and there's other regulations that the system relies upon. And I think you got to take a look at the regulations under Section 6012. 6001 is first section dealing with filing returns, but then you got Section 6012, so you got 1.6012-1. And read that regulation, 26 CFR. Read the Section 6012 regs.
But those all refer to people who are liable, and we're not.
Well, that's an issue, Claire.
It is.
We maintain that there's got to be a section making somebody liable. The system says no. And the reason for that is you need to go take a look at the Section 6012 regulations. Hey, send me a note, remind me, and tomorrow afternoon I'll send you the regulation. And I hate
All right, we
stuff
probably
like
need
this.
to wrap up here pretty soon. Mark, any final wrap up comments or housekeeping? You still there, Mark? Did Mark
Well, he's
disappear?
Yeah,
there.
I'm sorry. I'm still here. I didn't realize I was muted. I muted myself accidentally. So the last question we didn't answer or comment was from Jerry Shore. He says, I believe Eddie Craig is a former deputy from Austin. Yeah, he was a former sheriff deputy. But you also, Jerry, did not answer whether or not you got my Telegram link invite so we can communicate since you're in Texas. That's about it. But I
All
feel
right.
great about tonight. How about y'all? I think we had a good interaction.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, we enjoy, again, around 30 people. Pretty good turnout. So let's go through the housekeeping for Larry's website. And, I know this is a repeat for people that come every week, but there's lots of people that will watch the archives. So go to your start page and type in Beecraft Briefs. That will take you to this link. Click on it. That'll take you to Larry's website, the Dixieland Law Journal, all these different links. In particular, the one we talk about a lot is taxation here. And my website is agentfortruth.com. And I always like to point out to people the blog articles section. I like you to check out the 1040A scam. I'm really happy how with these recent shows with Lara Logan and Dinesh and Clayton Morris with Redacted, that I've been able to talk about this 1040A scam. I think it's one of the chief smoking guns to show that, well, if the IRS has to lie to their own computer system in order to get an assessment, that's probably a pretty good indication that they don't have the authority in the first place. So I'd love you to check that out and to spread it. And I think that's about it. Oh, there's the article there. Sorry to Toby, who tried to join just as we're closing down. All right, Mark, any last words?
Yeah, I just admitted Toby so we can say goodbye to him. So his efforts were not all in vain. But as a reminder, as soon as Joe sends me the recording, I will be editing it and posting it on No Mass Tax Chat, probably before Joe posts it on Agent for Truth. Is that correct, Joe?
Yeah, I'm really behind. I got to do like, there's some snags in like number 111 or 112. This is show 117. And I like to do them in order. I guess that's the accountant in me. But as soon as I get those snags fixed with 110 or 111 show, then I can put the succession in and get caught up. But yeah, the mark is much more quick. So if you're on the No Mas Tax Telegram channel, you're going to see it a lot quicker than if you wait for Joe.
You will also see the chat with all the addresses and the correspondence. So Eric says he cannot find Dixieland Law Journal. Would you please present that once more? And I think we can wrap afterwards.
All right. So you go to a search engine, type in Beecraft Briefs like that. And when you hit enter, you'll see, you may have to scroll a little bit past the underwear ads. Beecraft Briefs, highway.net. Click on that, and that'll take you to Larry's Dixieland Law Journal. The topic we talk most about is taxation here, but Larry has all kinds of stuff, even on the Second Amendment, alternative medicine. He talks about some of the, issues or people that claim they have solutions, but maybe not. So, check out Larry's opinions on that. Lots of good stuff. And then my website is agentfortruth.com. And in the chat was links. Hopefully, I think, Mark, you make that chat available to the No Mas Tax Telegram group too, also, right?
Yes, I do. So but people can do that for themselves if they want. And a quick reminder how they do that. They move over to the top right corner of their window in on their screen, and there are three dots, three horizontal dots. And if they click on that, it says meeting group chat. And right above that, it says save chat. So it's as simple as that, and it will download in your download folder. Did that help?
Yes, fantastic.
Good. So that way I don't even have to send it. For those who are interested in the chat, they click on those three dots, save chat, look in their download folder. They have it instantaneously.
Phenomenal. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday night. God bless you. Tomorrow's Easter Sunday. God bless everyone. God bless our country. And we'll see you next time.
See you next week.